So we heard of some of the tools that we're going to have to be using, some of the new media formats from Juan and from Gary in our South China Morning Post example. So now let's hear about how one of the great business brands is doing precisely this, using some of these new formats. And please welcome the editor of HBR.org at the Harvard Business Review in the USA, Maureen Hoch. Maureen.
Hello, good morning. It's so nice to be here with all of you. I can tell you that it is just as cold in Berlin as it is in Boston right now, so that feels very familiar. I'm really excited to be here and share some of our experiences at HBR. I'm going to be talking about experiments, engagement, and some of the things that we've done on emerging formats. And before we launch into that, I just want to say defining engagement, I think, is really difficult. There's not one definition of engagement for any publisher or company. You have to do some work to figure out how you define engagement, and I'm going to talk about it in several different frames here, and I hope that they're useful to you. So I'm going to start with a story of two different experiments that we did, and they produced slightly different results. The first one is a format we call Whiteboard Sessions, which we've been doing for about 2 years now, and it's just as you would expect a whiteboard to be. It's an expert in front of a whiteboard explaining an idea, sort of schoolroom style. And it's something that we started when we started doing Facebook Live 2 years ago this month, I think. Just like a lot of publishers who started doing Facebook Live, we had to kind of fumble around a little bit and figure out the right combination of things and whether this platform worked for us. And the early days were definitely early in that way, but I wanted to show you this screenshot from one of our very first whiteboards. This is Evan Baer. Evan is a really smart entrepreneur and marketing expert. He co-wrote a book for HBR Press called Get Backed about entrepreneur and getting your business idea backed. And we were still trying to figure out whiteboards. We were like, I don't know, is this going to work? What do we do? Evan came in and first did one thing, and if you take something away when you're starting something new, make sure you bring in some people who are true believers in the platform. Evan came in and said, this is awesome, we're going to do this, brought a lot of energy and enthusiasm to this experiment. We did a lot of things. We wrote a lot of stuff on the whiteboard behind him. I cut it off, but we had a screen with like a slide deck. I mean, we had everything, literally. Also, we were shooting this on a phone. We didn't have like professional equipment. It was, we were really just sort of winging it. But as soon as Evan started talking, and he had a ton of energy, and he was really looking to connect with the audience and believe that he was connecting with that audience, views immediately went up, comments immediately went up, and for a long time, this was one of our most popular whiteboards, and we've done more than 100 of them now. We have had some that have since lapped this one, but it had 100. I think to date it has 100,000 views, more than 500 shares. I think what we learned from this early experiment is that we had something here in terms of connecting with our audience. We had to come up with the right combination of expert, audience, and topic to do it. But I think when you're starting something new on a new format, you have to decide if that spark is there for your team and for the people involved. And this was an early sign to us that we did have something that has turned into this. As I said, we've now done more than 100 whiteboards, and we're actually in the process of thinking about how we're going to expand this particular program into different things on HBR.org and other places. As you can see, we improved our equipment. We got better cameras. We got better mics. We started really thinking about that combination of visual content and connection with the audience. We removed a moderator from on screen, so it was a really direct person to audience connection. The top 3 people there you see are all Harvard Business School professors, and we actually just crossed a big milestone last week where we had Harvard Business School's Michael Porter do a Facebook Live with us. And if you know anything about management theory, he has borne many classic ideas on strategy, so that was really exciting for us. As we continue to figure out what platforms are right for this live streaming experience, this was a piece of engagement that worked. So I'm going to talk about another story with a slightly different conclusion. So 6 times a year, HBR publishes a very special digital package called The Big Idea. It explores a really important idea in business and management. We think of it like an event. It rolls out over several days and explores something very important. So I guess it was 1 year ago, actually, this month, we had a very important piece on inequality among companies. So this was written by a professor at Stanford named Nicholas Bloom, and he was exploring how inequality isn't just rising between individuals, it's rising between companies too. Extremely important, extremely timely. So the editors who are working on this thought, great, let's figure out some ways to get readers of this content to connect with Professor Bloom. We turned to Slack. And like a lot of you, I'm guessing a lot of you might use Slack in your workplaces. We were certainly using Slack and starting to experiment with it in other ways. So we said, why don't we try? We'll create a Slack channel. We'll invite people to come. We'll have Professor Bloom engage. We'll have our editors engage. It'll be great. So we had more than, I think, 150 people join this particular channel. And this conversation, it's kind of hard to see, but this is Nicholas Bloom and one of our editors having a great conversation. No one was participating in this. So we had maybe a handful of people actually, type in and actually ask a question. Now, why exactly was that? I mean, we didn't survey people afterwards to get the definitive answer. My guess is, it's intimidating. Maybe typing out your question about inequality among companies. It's a very sort of weighty topic. Maybe they were waiting for somebody else to chime in. Sometimes I've found that when you're trying to engage an audience, you need a leader. You need somebody who sort of starts it, and then other people will fill in behind. Regardless of the reason, we found that this particular experiment didn't work in terms of engaging the audience in the way we had hoped. That led us to a few different conclusions, and this kind of frames some of the things I'm talking about today. The medium does really matter when it comes to the kind of engagement you're doing. You have to test your assumptions constantly, and this is something we do at HBR a lot. I mean, we will write down our assumptions about an audience or a piece of content and really try to find out what those assumptions hold. And you have to know what emerging platforms do best. And in order to know what they do best, they have to know how they fit your strategy. This is a little small slice of what strategy means for us at HBR. It's a pretty familiar story that the more frequently you engage with us, the more likely you are to subscribe, the more likely you are to perhaps buy a product or register for a newsletter or something like that. So more and more, you might look at that strategy and say, oh, this is how we're thinking about everyone, like the top of the funnel. Well, no, more and more we're thinking about how this applies to subscribers, possible subscribers, newsletter readers, our non-US audience. So we're taking that, that big picture and trying to think about how that frequency and engagement metric applies to all these different groups. One of the examples that we've done on the emerging side has been some work on bots and messaging. Now, why bots and messaging? This is a familiar story because the rise of use of messaging apps has just been huge. And one of the most recent bots that we launched just this past September was on Facebook Messenger. It's a very simple bot. You get it once a day. It delivers you our most recent digital articles. There are a bunch of reasons that made sense for us to try this on Facebook Messenger. We had a big audience on Facebook. Facebook has a huge global reach, which is very interesting to us. And I would say it's been okay. Like we haven't seen a huge, we were wondering if we should brace ourselves for this sort of onslaught of people picking up the bot because of the Facebook platform. That has not happened, I would say, and I think that's in line with what I've heard from other publishers. I was just at South by Southwest, I went to a panel about bots that had someone from Facebook Messenger and someone from Slack, and everyone's conclusion about the sort of disillusionment that's gone on about like what are chatbots for, what's my return, is that some of the conclusion, which wasn't very satisfying, is that it's just early. It's just early days for bot work. So we're watching this to see what kinds of improvements and studying it to see ways we might want to invest in it. But it has been an interesting experiment in meeting our audience where they are. The other one is we built a bot for Slack as opposed to the Facebook bot. This one very specifically offers you a piece of management advice once a day. We've had some nice feedback on this bot that people like it. They want more functionality. They want to be able to find the things that they're most interested in. And we also know from a survey that we took, those that answered the survey, around half of them already followed us on social, and those that answered, around 15%, were subscribers already. So there's an interesting question you have to ask as you do these kinds of experiments. Am I reaching a new market, or are these people who are already part of my community and I need to engage them more deeply? You could do a whole session just on voice and audio. We could spend the rest of the day on it. But I wanted to talk to you about two things that we've done recently. We've expanded our audio presence. We just launched 2 new podcasts in the last couple of months. And on the engagement side, I think what's interesting about this is Women at Work. We launched that as a limited run audio podcast project, and we really tried to approach it with a personal point of view. We had editors talking about their experiences. The response we've received to this has been really tremendous. Just people sending us email and responding to us, encouraging us to do more. For us, that's been a really great sign that we've resonated with a different kind of audience, and for us particularly at HBR, that we are reaching a female listenership and readership. That is a place that we have a lot of opportunity to grow. And Dear HBR is an advice podcast where we're asking users to send in, or readers to send in their questions. That's also an exciting form of doing more listening to the audience than we've done before. Voice. I am really thinking so much about voice right now as a place where we have to do more experimentation. We have a very small management tip of the day project right now as a flash briefing on Alexa. I think I would just say that the implications for voice, both in terms of how people are going to interact with your content, but more importantly, how they're going to search for it, are enormous. I keep seeing all these statistics that, soon voice assistance is going to take over a lot of what we do on the screen right now. We're watching this space very carefully, and I think there's going to be a lot more to say and a lot more to say at this event about that. Quickly, I just wanted to go through a couple of subscriber relationship activities that we've done that I thought that you all would be interested in. This is a newsletter called The Insider. It is only for subscribers. I write it once a week, and it's not a small editorial project. I write it, then there are 2 editors after me who work on it. But we have found that this particular product and then this editorial effort has done a good job of getting subscribers to actually come back and engage on our site. So one of our key strategic goals, and one of my goals as a head person of digital, is to get subscribers to engage with hbr.org. So while this is not a small amount of work to do, we have seen a nice return in actually getting subscribers to engage. And the other one is a Facebook subscriber group. I'm sure many of you are experimenting with Facebook groups. This one isn't, we sent out several different invitations for this group. So this wasn't one that we just kind of put out there to the world, like, hey, everybody join our Facebook subscriber group. We actually did a lot of work, and by we, I really mean our marketing and data team, to identify the different pockets of people who might be interested in this group. We sent them an email invitation. I think we have more than 6,000 people in the group now. So while it is a small group, and I think you'll see a theme today, you'll see a theme over the next couple of days that bigger isn't always better. Sometimes smaller reaps big rewards. We have found that the people that in this group are more likely to save, share, follow topics, and engage in our content in a higher rate than other groups. So again, it all depends on how you define engagement, but for us, a save and a share, a follow topic, all represents actions that you're taking that demonstrate a commitment to the content. So we're still also, like a lot of you, probably trying to figure out exactly what we do next with this group, but it's been a nice piece of learning for our community. I know I've just taken you on a whirlwind tour, but here are some of the most important questions that we're asking, and I would recommend any of you ask if you're trying to do these kinds of experiments. The why, how, for whom, and how long. I think those last 2 questions are actually the hardest ones to answer. Knowing which audience you're trying to reach, whether it's a new audience, whether it's your existing subscribers, like I said, whether it's a particular group of newsletter readers, that is so critical for how you think about how to frame these experiments. And then the how long is also a hard question, because sometimes you have to make tough decisions about what to keep doing and what to shut down. And I would say on that, I think as an editor, we're always hesitant to turn something off, because what if we have 10 super fans or something and they're going to be disappointed? I actually think the audience today is very forgiving of this. I think they want the best stuff you can give them. So I think we can all sort of free ourselves of some of that worry about shutting things down, and know that if you're going to deliver them something better in the next step, that's going to be worth it. My best advice Measuring this stuff is hard, especially if you're relying on another platform for some of the data. So if it's hard, don't feel bad, it's hard for everyone. Start simple. Back to that conversation I heard about bots, the person I heard from Facebook Messenger, the advice they gave was try to do one thing well and get people to build a habit around it. And I like that framing too, in terms of when you're sometimes working with outside design firms, there's a tendency to just build more and more and keep going, and we can do all this cool stuff. That's not gonna be great if you can't maintain it, you can't troubleshoot it, and you can't deliver a really good experience day after day. When you ask your audience to do something, have a plan for what you're going to do with it. You know, whether you're producing content with it, whether you're asking them to, inform a new experiment. I think it's not a great experience when you're constantly asking and never sort of reporting back on why. And you're going to have to make compromises, of course. I think we're all familiar with this. Sometimes it's around resources, sometimes it's around functionality. Hopefully you're not making a big compromise on your user experience most of all, but that's something, again, that's a shared experience amongst all of us. I thought I would just end with just a few things that we're thinking about at HBR. This is not exhaustive, but a few things I'm excited about. So certainly machine learning and the role of content discovery. As someone who works in the ideas and knowledge business, the ways that machine learning is going to change how we access information is going to have a huge impact. And we're researching that and studying it right now. I think one of the questions that we're asking is what happens one day when you can ask machine learning assisted device a good question and you get a good answer back. Well, I don't know that we're exactly there yet, but it's coming, and I think all of us should be thinking about the ways that our content and material is going to play into that. The role of community for HBR, that's a big area that we're trying to figure out, and I'd love to hear if any of you have interesting experiences with community efforts and experiments. Visual stories, Snapchat, and Instagram. Again, a huge important part of how people are consuming content and how the next generation of readers will consume content. We are working on a possible Snapchat experiment at HBR and just sort of starting to create some plans there, and we're excited to sort of try something completely new. New forms of curation. So just remember that curation can happen in a lot of different places. It could be that newsletter I showed you. It could be on an outside platform. It could be on your site. But the more that we can do some of that work for our subscribers, and that the editorially driven aspect of curation is something that we're working on. And the last one is more one just from me. It's about the role of calendar integrations. So I've been watching calendar integrations from other publishers and other places, and the ways people are using the calendar to either prompt people or to maintain a relationship with them. I'm interested in thinking more about how that could play into some of the work we do at HBR, especially as it pertains to applying practical advice to your workday. If any of you are working on calendar integrations, I would love to hear about that, because I think that's a really interesting area to explore. And that's it. If you have questions, please come find me. I'll be here. Find me on Twitter. Follow us at Harvard Biz. It's been really great to share all this with you.
Thank you.